Hi, PJ.
Hi.
Okay, so I have to just say, first of all, that I read this book with a lot of fear and loathing because, like I think is emblematic of baby boomers, I both fear and loathe myself. I'm frightened by, I didn't want to be a baby boomer. Do you hear this from people when we talk about this book to say that they were unhappy to be a baby boomer?
No, actually I don't.
Really?
No, that's more something I hear from the teenage kids around the house. I didn't ask to be born. To which the proper response is, funny you should mention that. Actually I think that while the generation that is never going to get old has its moments of discomfort with the fact that the very youngest of us are turning 50 this year, I think most people are pretty glad to have belonged to the baby boom because we had so much damn fun. Of course, we're not counting the people who died.
Fun while it lasted. That's how we count them.
Fun while it lasted.
But,
it was fun while it lasted.
I mean, it's an interesting thing. I mean, this book it's a comedy, but it's also encyclopedic. I mean, it's so comprehensive what you're covering in this book. I laughed, I cried, and I really did wonder because I actually thought this was really fantastic. What Publishers Weekly, I don't usually quote them, said, though, they said you're simultaneously lampooning and celebrating. So what I wanted to know is, what percentage is the lampoon? What percentage is the celebrating?
Well, I started out, I think, with, I started out not liking the baby boom. I may have been glad to have been part of it because of all the fun that I had. But I thought overall, you know, this is this generation that had everything handed to us. I mean, we grew up in this period of amazing, strong, steady American economic growth. It was, yes, there was the Korean War, but we too young to remember it. Ike was president, you know, our parents stayed together, everything was, you know, the public, you still go to the public schools without getting stabbed, often, at any rate. Locked in the locker, yes, but not stabbed.
You might get your hands wrapped.
You might get, oh yeah, you went to, well, Catholic school, yeah, Catholic school. That was public school with hitting.
Controlled violence.
Yeah. But, you know, we grew up with all this optimism in the most powerful, most stable, most prominent and strongest country in the world. And what did we do with all the advantages that we had? And I'm thinking phone apps, you know, I mean, it's just that's, you know, what our, but then as I started to write and I started to research and I started to think about all this more, I began to realize that we may have created the first generation of nice people on Earth. It's a generation that wants to give the world a hug and a drug. You know, we're not full of hatred, you know, or not full. We've had our share of nutty ideas over the years, but they've never carried us forward. And I mean, it's impossible to imagine a Bolshevik revolution, you know, from the American baby boom, or a cultural revolution. We may have thought we were having a cultural revolution, but not, you know,
right,
the way
unless
it
the
was
slogan for the revolution could fit on a T-shirt.
On a T-shirt, yes.
Because,
so one of my points in the book is that
right.
we are a generation that has had a lot of deep thoughts, and yet, oddly enough, every one of those thoughts can fit on a T-shirt.
You know, and that's what I was wondering, that gave me pause, because I thought, which is your favorite T-shirt slogan? Mine compete between I'm with stupid and my blank went to blank and all I got was this lousy T-shirt. Which is a bigger scourge on our society? Which of those two, PJ?
Well, I'm with stupid when they've got the arrow pointed in the wrong direction, you know, so it's like pointed at a random passerby, and like, you know, in previous generations they would have gotten punched for that, but, you know, if you've got an I'm with stupid T-shirt with an arrow on it, you have to stay on the correct side of the stupid person.
Okay, what you just said, give a hug and a drug, right? You have said that one of the biggest contributions baby boomers have made is our fantastic enjoyment and proliferation of drug culture. So which is your favorite
Well, yeah,
baby boom drug?
I actually think that taking drugs is kind of a bad name, just because it killed a bunch of people. That's sad.
What doesn't kill you makes you higher.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. Baby boom is filled with stories of people who tried to commit suicide and didn't take quite enough and just had a good time. But let's face it, the drugs taught a whole generation of Americans the metric system. Huh?
That is true.
Did you have any idea what a gram was? A kilo? Who knew? Who knew? But the other thing is, it was actually a slightly more serious point. I have this psychiatrist friend who's my age, and who uses a lot of psychopharmaceuticals and treats a lot of things for like depression and anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder. And he said, you got to understand, the baby boom knows about brain chemistry. The baby boom, the whole baby boom has a degree in street pharmacology. They really understand a brain chemistry, because they know you could take a tiny little piece of blotter paper soaked in hardly anything, and you pop that in your mouth, and you'll be nuts for the next 18 hours. And so we know that, and so when baby boomers are having problems, mental problems, we know that something is amiss with our brain chemistry. And he said, when I treat people born before 1946, the first thing they say to me is, "Doc, when can I get off these drugs?" And when I treat people born after 1946, the first thing they say is, "Doc, when can I get some more?"
Okay, so, that just brings me to, I thought, one of the most subversive lines that I have ever read, which I think only you can write because of your stature. You wrote that cocaine was the baby boomer girl's beer. And I thought, whoa. That is true.
Yeah, that takes some explaining, doesn't it? Yeah.
How do you get away with writing that?
I don't know.
Unapologetically.
I'm amazed my wife didn't come out and whack me over the head with a thesaurus on that one.
Do your kids read this? Do your kids read?
Well, no. Okay. My kids don't read this. And the reason that my kids don't read this is because they're my kids.
Right.
I was talking to this friend of mine. Some of you may know who he is, Andy Ferguson. He's a political writer. Mostly for the Weekly Standard, brilliant, hates everybody, which is exactly the right attitude for a political writer to have. And Andy's kids are a little older than mine, so when Andy's kids were teenagers and mine were still little, I said, "Andy, what do you tell your kids about drugs? They're getting to that point, And he said, "I lie. Daddy never did drugs. Drugs are bad. Daddy never did drugs." That picture of Daddy with his hair all over the place, I was in a band. We did a lot of folk masses. I lied. And I said, "Andy, you've written about taking drugs." And he said, "PJ, the only people on earth that you can count on, absolutely count on, to never read a single thing you've ever written are your kids. They are completely bored with you. They've heard it all. They do not want to hear anymore." But back to cocaine. It was starting in high school, generally boys discovered beer before girls did in high school. We discovered beer, and it was a wonderful, wonderful discovever. It just made the whole world better. Occasionally we'd crack a car into a tree, but other than that, it made the whole world better. And so we thought, and it really loosened us up and made us brave and do things that we otherwise wouldn't do. So we thought, beer, girls, give beer to girls. Then they will do things that they previously wouldn't do.
But it didn't
work.
Yeah, it doesn't work, right.
It didn't work. They threw up. They'd get giggly for about 15 minutes and then they'd lock themselves in the bathroom,
No,
and so we spent years after this trying to figure out, what is beer for girls? What is it that we can give girls that will actually make them, do it? And we tried wine coolers, we tried pot, we made all this effort for wine spritzers, we tried Campari and soda. We tried every possible thing to get girls to sleep with us, and none of it worked until cocaine.
Right.
Yeah,
well,
and because cocaine really does lower your judgment. I mean, it lowers your judgment down to the point where you will sleep with me.
And it worked.
Yeah.
It worked. Apparently, when you read the book, you will see that it worked. Now, it was interesting.
It didn't work all that well for me, actually. But if I'd been a little better looking and able to afford more coke, maybe it might have.
More is always better. So here's the interesting thing you're talking about the difference between baby boom girls, baby boom boys. When you were writing about the games that people played when we were growing up, I just thought, my God, I mean, you forget about, it was reading this book, I had these waves of, I'm going to admit this, nostalgia and even kind of sentimentality in a way that I didn't expect for things like, you wrote about how all the boys would playing war games all the time, and cowboys. Yeah. I mean, if you saw kids today doing this, every mother and father would stop and say, "Oh, honey, we don't do that. We negotiate."
My wife,
this is so un-PC.
My 10-year-old, has play dates. I love the whole play dates.
Right. No, we just
none
roamed.
of the fun of playing,
roamed.
None of the fun of dating combined into a play date. But anyway, he had play dates. And my mom will actually ask the other mom involved, because these things are usually put together by moms. She would say, our son Cliff has toy guns. Is that okay with you?
Right.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah, I did that.
Oh, and this is absolutely true. I read it today in the New York Times, so it has to be true. Florida there was such a zero tolerance on any sort of weapon stuff in grade school. Florida is passing a law that forbids suspending children if they bite a Pop-Tart into the shape of a pistol and point it at another kid.
Wow.
Because there was a kid who was expelled from school in Florida for biting a Pop-Tart into the shape of a pistol and pointing it at another kid.
But you can stand your ground in Florida. It's very confusing. Just don't go to Florida.
It is confusing. You can stand your ground except with Pop-Tarts.
Except for that. Wait, do you think that we have lost or gained something?
You mean in the terms of the childhood?
Yeah.
No.
Are there any gains we can see? Because when you point it out in the book, of course it seems silly. I was that mother. I've got a 15-year-old. I turned his toy chest into a demilitarized zone. I took the lightsabers off the Star Wars characters. I became that mother. Yeah,
no, not
I did.
me. Well, it'd be hard for me to become a mother anyway. But I mean, no. Nerf guns. I love Nerf guns. I wish we had
I had
Nerf
a detente on Nerf guns I allowed. Because Nerf guns are fun.
Because we have this game that we have a big playroom, and that my son and I play, is we line up all the what was that sort of Lego scale little figurines that they have, the little Playmobil. All the little Playmobil people. He's got about 1,000 little Playmobil people.
A firing squad?
Yeah, and what we call this is Playmobil Zombie War. And he and I take the Nerf guns, and we line up all the Playmobil people, and we shoot at the Playmobil people and see how many we can knock down. And then the Playmobil people that don't get knocked down get to advance one step toward us.
I hope there's not if there's a nanny cam in your house, your social services is gonna come.
Yes, yeah. Well, fortunately, we're in New Hampshire, and they're pretty busy with the meth addict parents, so
Oh, that's
probably not getting to the
time-consuming.
zombie war Nerf gun parents for a while. And if the remaining zombies get too close, we have a nuclear option. We have mom's yoga ball.
Oh, yes.
Down they go.
Finally getting some use.
Yeah.
You actually asked in the book, you said you weren't sure what boomer girls were doing, and I wanted to let you in on a secret.
Well, tell me,
in my childhood, now I'm what you call a freshman boomer. I was born in 61. I've been trying to say I'm not a boomer for a very long time, but you have you have made
I
it
actually
clear
did
that
some
I am a
demographic
boomer.
research, and I'm afraid
I know.
you are one, yeah.
It turns out that I am. As I said, a lot of loathing about that. But so what we were doing was, where I lived in Wilmington, Delaware, we spent our early years collecting lightning bugs in jars that sometimes had oxygen holes, sometimes not. And we watched them slowly die. You can't do this today.
No,
Not that
no.
it was so great, but it
PETA
was
would be right on you. Actually, we would take the
inexpensive.
lightning bugs and squash them and paint them on our face.
Oh, we did that too. We did that too. And
yeah,
then,
that was the,
as we got older, we sat in the sun with these foil folding things and baked ourselves into later having melanoma. It's been fantastic.
so that's what girls were doing.
That's
well,
what girls
no
were
wonder
doing.
we didn't want to play with them.
Yes,
I mean,
clearly,
until
we were
later when
busy.
we wanted to play with them and they didn't want to play with us.
Okay, let's talk about the thing that you write about in the book, though. So I'm admittedly a freshman boomer, so you've really categorized this. You've got your senior boomers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You've got your, what are the middle class called again? Middle boomers?
I'll run through the whole thing. Run through the whole thing. Because, I had 75 million baby boomers on my plate here to write about. And obviously they can't all be alike. But I think, well, how do we separate these things? Because, sorting baby boomers according to race or gender, ethnicity or class, this would be a very un-baby boom thing to do. This is like it would offend baby boom sensibilities. And so I thought, well, can't really do that, but time, because baby boom extends 1946 to 1964. And I thought, well, time and a generation that would never grow up, is never going to grow up. So I said, let me treat them as high school classes. High school class being the right way to analyze baby boom. So, excuse me, I've been heavily researching legal changes in Washington State and Colorado. It takes a little toll. So the senior baby boomers are the baby boomers who were born right after the war, late 1940s. And so we are, and I'm one of those, and we were right on the bow wave of this baby boom voyage of exploration. And yet, at the same time, our parents are still young when we're born. We are still very closely tethered to the greatest generation. Mm-hmm. So we end up getting keel hauled. We end up getting dragged under the bottom of the boat and turning out kind of soggy and shaky a little bit,
So give us some examples
well,
of who those people are.
A very simple example of like what senior baby boomers are. Hillary Clinton is a senior baby boomer, and so is Cheech of Cheech and Chong. And you put if they have a kid, that's the senior baby. Then you have the junior baby boomers, often the younger siblings of the senior baby boomers, and they are born in the early 50s, and they so early to middle 50s, and they are often their parents by this time are like throwing in the towel, on the what's the matter with kids today thing. So the parents are just giving up. And this junior class of baby boomers are actually much wilder than the senior class.
This is like Joey Ramone.
Joey Ramone, yeah, or John Belushi. John actually was born in '49, but I knew John, and I'm sure he was held back a couple years. And so, anyway, he fits in this thing. And so these were the real barefoot ragamuffins in Haight-Ashbury, the crazy groupies, the completely flipped out. This would have been much more likely. But at the same time, that junior class of baby boomers, that's also Bill Gates, that's also Steve Jobs, those who were both born in 1955. So these like shoeless hippies did eventually find some shoes, and make their way to Silicon Valley. They never did find their neckties, but they turned out to be probably the most productive part of the baby boom. They're the internet, Then you have the sophomores, and the sophomores here are a little more cautious because the sophomores have seen the baby boom in action. They've seen your older brothers and sisters and older kids in the neighborhood, and so they're going, they're totally into the sex, drugs, and rock and roll and the deep philosophical principles thereof. But at the same time,
they're smoking a lot of pot, basically, is what you're saying.
Oh, they are smoking a lot of pot, but they know from experience, they know that what works in general terms does not always work when the bong sets fire to the beanbag chair. So, like, you know, the sophomore baby boomers, some of them went at college, some of them actually went to class. You know, some even snuck off and got MBAs. Preppy handbook, that is written by sophomore.
Right.
Then you have the freshmen, the strangest, and my dear,
Very
I mean,
confusing,
no personal offense.
very self-loathing.
But these, again, I don't know about the self-loathing, but they're like, it's, for the freshmen, the baby boom is just the way the world has always been. They don't have this like visceral experience of what shaped the baby boom. I mean, the war in Vietnam, if they remember it at all, it's something that was just unaccountably on television all the time, like Ed McMahon, you know, I mean, who knew? And you know, they have no, they know about things like the civil rights movement, but they have no actual experience with it. This is done. Feminism has gone from a pressing social issue to Maude, you know, a show that their parents like on TV. You know, Martin Luther King is a day off from work. You know, I mean, they think the world has always been like this. And my favorite example of this is President Obama. When he was first running for president, there was, you may well remember, a sort of scandal or something about the Reverend Wright. The Reverend Wright was the pastor at Barack and Michelle Obama's church. In fact, he had married them, he baptized their children. You may recall that the Reverend Wright was a man of forceful opinions, as we may say. God damn America, you know, and various ideas such as the CIA invented AIDS to kill black people. And so, like, Fox News and the Republican Party and the conservatives all just jump on this. Oh, you know, this is the guy, you know, he went to this church, you know, this. But, you know, the story didn't, as you recall, really play out. It didn't do any damage to Obama's campaign. The story just and the reason the story kind of went away was pretty soon people figured out that Barack Obama, yeah, he was there, but he wasn't listening to any of this.
Right.
He's like in the back pew blackberrying to Rahm Emanuel, you know? Because to Barack Obama, the world had always been full of bullshit, you know? And of course that's the way people talked, you know? And so, you know, and it just, you know, never, and I'm thinking, no, you know, when, if that would have been my part of the baby boom, the senior class of the baby boom, we would have been standing on a pew, clenched fist in the air, you know, demanding property damage over at the University of Chicago. You know, and the junior baby boomers, assuming they were up early enough to go to church and assuming they could find the church, you know, would have been like sitting there sort of in stoned, nodding in stoned agreement and hoping that the church's social outreach program included free lunch. And the sophomore baby boomers would have been going, wait a minute, Reverend Wright, I think that's pitching it a little high and inside, you know. But the freshman baby boomers, oof, you know, whatever, you know.
One of the things you write in the book that I thought so well captures the difference in the generations, where you said it's the baby boomers, the difference between the baby boomers and the what's next? Baby boomers and the Gen X are baby boomers said, fuck it, fuck you, and Gen X said we're fucked. So you go from fuck you to we're fucked, and I think that the freshmen...
You can hear it in the music.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, you think about the Ramones, when I think about what is emblematic of that is the song I'm Against It by the Ramones, right? And then you go to Alanis Morissette, Gen X, and she's singing Isn't It Ironic?
Yes.
So you really see it, and I think that people
a word, incidentally, that she had failed to look up in the dictionary.
It's really,
but
the irony of that song.
Rain on your wedding day. I'm sorry, that's not ironic.
It's just bad weather.
It's weather. It's just bad weather.
It's just weather.
But yeah, there is, because the last baby boom musical movement, I mean, our last sort of teenage musical movement was punk, which was very much fuck you. You know?
Right.
And then the minute you get to like Generation X, you know, the whole tone changes to, oh, fuck me, you know, it's just terrible, you know.
Yeah, isn't it ironic?
Yeah.
So, and that is ironic, actually. But
I
what
suppose
she
it is,
said
in
is
a
not
way,
ironic.
yeah.
It's one of the strange things about reading the book. As I'm laughing, I was saying I was feeling nostalgic and a certain kind of sentimentality for things that I always thought were terrible. And I wondered whether you meant for this book to have that effect. Because, for instance, you write about the dreaded dinner vegetable. I didn't even know there was anything other than lima beans until I moved to New York to go to college. What? There are other vegetables? And people don't just boil them until they're soggy?
Boil.
I mean, we just face down these lines. But when I read about it in your book, I kind of felt nostalgic.
You wanted lima beans,
I did.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I didn't want
No,
it, but I
don't.
felt
Yeah.
nostalgic for
Yeah,
it.
you'd be right.
Now, did you mean to have that
Well, I
effect?
meant to evoke, I mean, the large part of this book is, it's not a memoir, because what a memoir is about how I'm so different from everybody else, you know. And this is not what this book
Right.
about. It's much more about how we're all the same. And what I was trying to do with my memories was kind of use them as yeast to sort of plant in the bread dough of other people's memories. And so what I was trying to do is get the reader to go, oh yeah, I've completely forgotten the lima beans. Greatest Generation was terrified of vegetables.
Yes,
They were terrified of
that's
vegetables.
true.
They knew that if you didn't boil vegetables for 3 hours, they could
Right.
kill you. You know?
It could be dangerous. You know, I have
Yeah.
a little theory about that. Let's try that. I think there was something to this, that actually living in a world that was just the lima bean, maybe by exposing us to all these other vegetables, we're giving these new generations too much choice, too confusing. What do you
It could
think?
be.
It could
yeah.
be.
They seem confused. I mean, you know, what else explains nose rings?
It's
You know?
it's kale.
Kale explains
the nose ring.
overdose
It's
of
terrible.
kale.
Okay.
Kale. I come from the Midwest. What is kale? You know, I say, honestly, up until a couple of years ago, I thought it was seaweed. I was absolutely positive
No,
that it
it's
was seaweed.
seaweed's more popular cousin.
Oh.
Okay, so here's one thing I thought was really subversive that you wrote about.
And incidentally, coming from the Midwest, I still consider sushi to be what we called bait.
Yes. Oh, that marks you as a senior baby
It
boomer.
does, yeah, and a Midwesterner.
I see sushi and I think breakfast because I'm a freshman. Okay, so.
Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No. One of the most subversive things you will read in this book when you read it is, I mean, this is something I just never saw in print, was you have dared to mention, well, you allude to this, that boogers might actually taste great.
Not speaking from personal experience here. I'm just talking about how
I've never seen that in print.
children lie. Children lie. It is innate in children. Children do not tell the truth about things, even really important things like what boogers taste like. You can't get the truth out of a kid.
No, you can't.
It's
So
useless
I'm
to
just
try.
curious, what would you say? Is booger a salty or a savory? Which one?
I plead the fifth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have to say, I felt this was an omission, and I didn't know whether this was on purpose or maybe you grew up in a different kind of household. But one of the touchstones, I think, of growing up as a boomer was growing up in a household where our mothers collected green stamps.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I didn't actually include that in the book, but I remember those like very distinctly. And you could
Yes.
take them down to the green stamp
Right.
redemption store and buy a pole lamp.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Why anyone wanted a pole lamp
You
was,
just
another
had
question.
to buy it, but you
yeah,
left
yeah.
that out. I'm just
I did
curious
leave that out.
why.
I'm sorry.
I
All
right, well, it's up for grabs
in
for
the next
someone
in the
else.
paperback edition,
In the
green
paperback,
stamps will.
we'll work on that.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things you wrote about, that you said one of the greatest examples of a boomer was Bill Clinton. And when you wrote that, I thought, okay, that's because of what you said about how boomers, one of the things that marks us is that we didn't want to grow up, we wanted to become older, greater children. And I thought that really does explain Bill Clinton really well.
The other thing is he's really full of shit, which is just a generational trademark. You know, we mastered that. That's why we're good at politics. We are so good. I mean, the reason that Washington is deadlocked It's not because people disagree, it's because it's run by boomers, and we're just so good at this stuff, so good that nobody can win, you know? I mean, it's like in a permanent tie. And like, we realized a couple of things. First, we realized that the essence of politics is bullshit, you know? And which I think our parents knew, but they weren't going to tell us, you know? The essence of politics is
Because they were the
bullshit.
silent generation.
They were
didn't want to tell
no.
us.
Silent generation comes
it
in
comes
between
up-
the
right.
greatest generation
Right.
and the baby boom. And they were really noisy. They had hot rods and loud rock and roll music. And why they're called the silent generation, I have no idea. But no, we realized that politics was bullshit. But, you know, people had figured that out before. What we figured out was that politics is this prestigious, powerful profession with an absolutely no barriers of entry. If you doubt me, go look at who is in elected office in Washington. I mean, yeah, we could become doctors and lawyers and engineers the way our parents, but that meant years of school and getting good
Right.
grades and you know.
Hard work.
Yeah,
Too
it was hard work.
Too hard.
Politics, man. You can run the world and be a complete idiot.
Or
you know?
run hedge funds. That's easy too.
Well,
apparently.
I've never found it personally easy myself, but some people must. You know, I think they did a little better. Somebody was paying attention in math. It didn't happen to be the honest kids,
I
but
don't know
somebody
that
was
running a
attention.
hedge fund the way they've been run actually means you have to be good in math, really.
But bullshit,
It's
yeah.
bullshit.
No,
It's
if
the
you're good
bullshit
at math
factor.
and bullshit, you
Right.
can. But the thing about politics, I mean, we just really love the idea that there is no quality control in this field, you know? No exam that you have to pass, nothing that you have to prove, no skill really that you have to master except BS, you know? And so it is our perfect.
Well, so this is the legacy, though, of the boomers, what we've seen in politics, right? I mean, but
Yeah.
now, you know, this is what I was really curious about. At the end of the book, you're saying the whole world is baby boomers.
Will be.
Will be baby boomers.
Will be.
But I don't really understand that. How do you see the future of the millennials, or what's being called the shallows? Where do they fit into the...
No, see, I do
have
think.
one at home. I call them the shallows.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I've got a teen, two actually. I'm double teamed teen.
Wow.
Yeah, but no, I do think, I mean, the book ends up being optimistic, and the reason it ends up being optimistic is because of that thing I said earlier, that that we have created this generation that is fundamentally nice, that wants to be loved and wants other people to love them and wants to love other people.
But is this carrying over to this next generation, do you think?
I do think it is. It's a little bit muddied by economic problems that we've been having since 2008. But basically what produces baby boom type people is stability, economic growth, broad opportunity, of the kind that our generation, my generation of baby boomers, were the first in the entire world, first large generation of children in the entire world to have things so good. You know, I mean, we basically had the life that an aristocracy might have had 100, 200, you know, Downton Abbey, you know, we were all living in Downton Abbey, albeit the Downton Abbey was in Levittown, but you know what I mean? We had, you know, we had more bathrooms. We had better bathrooms than Downton,
and dental care.
Yeah, we had better dental care than
fantastic.
than they did in Downton Abbey. So, you know, I think as the world becomes more prosperous and more badly educated in a liberal arts, art major sort of way like us, and just becomes like less dangerous, less frantic, that our sensibility will in the end triumph. I don't know, it's not going to happen in 5 years, it's not going to happen in 10, it may take hundreds. In certain parts of the world, it may take thousands, you know. But eventually, I think this is where we're headed. And I don't think it's such a bad place to be. I mean, yes, we have our shortcomings, and no, you don't want to go to us for investment advice. But I mean, you know,
But you do want to get the drugs from us.
You do want to get the drugs from us.
Okay.
We know our drugs.
All right,
Yeah.
so, you know, not to make too much of a nod to wait, don't tell me, but how about a little lightning round?
A
You ready
lightning
for
round.
that lightning round? Okay.
Okay.
If you had to say one, who is your favorite boomer?
Who is my favorite?
Who's
That'd be
our
my
boomer
wife.
poster boy?
I'm not a crazy person.
Oh, that's...
You know?
That's because this is being
Not
filmed.
only-
This is being filmed. I get
not,
it, but
not
you know.
only is it my wife, but she has a .38 revolver. Her father was a career FBI agent. When she said she was 14 before she realized that all men didn't carry a gun to work, you know, and she's a considerably better shot than I am,
You're sticking with that.
and I love her.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So, yeah,
favorite, worst legacy of the boomers? If there's one thing that we did that really we should take back.
It's a sexual irresponsibility, and you see it reflected. This is not a funny answer. Single parents. I mean, our inability to stick with a relationship through the difficult parts, our like sloppiness about, I mean, the whole trying to get a baby boom man, trying to find him, let alone get him to pay child support, you know. The fact that the sheer number, when Pat Moynihan wrote that report about the Negro family that caused so much trouble in 1963 and 1964, the rate of illegitimacy that he was talking about, that he found so worrying within African American families, is now the normative rate for middle class Americans. And that's not good, you know.
Okay.
I mean, it takes two people to raise a child, and usually that .38 revolver.
One of just your emblematic baby boom song. What is our theme song? If there had to be one. I know it spans a big time.
Well, it certainly isn't "Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow."
Oh God,
That
I have to hear that again.
definitely did. Yeah,
yeah.
Got to be "Start Me Up."
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
that
especially
is a good
as
one.
I
Okay.
get older.
Now,
Now that I actually look to see where the defibrillator is in the airport.
okay, I would say one of the worst things the baby boom gave us was the popularity of men wearing shorts just in regular life. I think we can agree on that, right? That's a scourge.
Men over 30 in shorts.
In shorts,
not
right?
a good idea.
It's
No,
not good.
No, nobody wants to see that.
No. Now, so before we have questions, just wanted to ask you one more thing.
Sure.
So when, you know, this book, I hope this doesn't sound like a terrible question, but is this book for us, for boomers, to read and go, oh my God, as my grandmother would say, fell about, oh, you know, laughing, crying. Is it for like studying for the youth, like learn from us? I had this imagination, because being a boomer, my favorite movies were the Planet of the Apes movies. I thought we could go back and change when they find the Statue of Liberty in the sand. She could be clutching this. We can go back and insert this. Is this a cautionary tale? I mean, do you know, should this be studied, or
Not
should
a
we just
cautionary
laugh about it?
It's just something for us, for fun. I think it could possibly be instructive to our children. Oh, so that's how they got so screwed up, you know. Could be possibly instructive for our parents. Oh, that's how they got so screwed up.
But is there an age minimum? Like, you know, we can't give this to people who are too young. It would frighten them too much. I don't know. What's the right age range?
I wrote it for my own generation. You know, I mean, I was really, you know, anytime a writer writes, if a writer's going to like do anything, even semi-worthwhile, the writer has got to be thinking about the reader.
Right.
I mean, it's all about the reader. The performer has to be thinking about the audience. You know, the musician has to be thinking about the people listening to the music. I firmly believe the artist has to be thinking about the person who's looking at the art. Which is why I hate Thomas Pynchon. You know, I can't stand him, you know, because I don't think he gives a shit about the reader, you know, and so, and I just have no use for that kind of stuff. And so, this was definitely written, you know, I had in my mind my friends, and not just people my age, but, you know, people I knew and my own publisher is a sophomore. My wife is a freshman. I obviously know plenty of juniors and seniors, and so I was thinking of all of those people when I wrote that book, and said the book's mainly for them.
Well, you're going to love this book, whichever you fit into, and I can see sort of all of us represented as we sit here. And I think it's time to take some questions.
With one and now going into 2 terms of the Obama administration.
Okay, now hold on one second. Back
With,
up.
with 1 term full of the Obama administration and going into the second one,
Yeah.
good and bad, have you leaned more to the right or more to the left? Are you staying where you at? Because I know your politics for this crowd a little bit is a little maybe controversial. So I'm just wondering if you've, in terms of your general political stance, if you've...
President Obama has made, I mean, I'm pretty politically conservative, but I have a very strong libertarian streak in that political conservatism. And I would say that streak has been brought out a lot by this administration. I really do. One of the things is, it's not so much did I disagree with liberals about any particular program that the federal government does, or any particular idea of programs. My disagreement, and it isn't really a disagreement with liberals, it's a disagreement with the government itself. It's quantitative. I am scared of the damn size of the thing. Now, what I was talking earlier about politicians, how really there's no barrier to entry, there's no entrance exam, there's no proof of bona fides are needed. Okay, you put together federal spending, state spending, and city spending, and it equals 40% of our GDP. 40% of our GDP is being controlled by politicians, people to whom you would not loan your car, people that you would not let babysit your children, especially older girl children. These people are in charge of 40% of our gross domestic product. It just worries me. I mean, they're doing 40% of our work. They're doing 40% of our laundry, I mean, we go to the bar. They're making 4 out of 10 drinks on the house. I don't think so, I mean, we're tired and our spouse is feeling romantic. Do they come over and take care of foreplay? Actually, during the Clinton administration, that could have happened, So my objection is quantitative, and I don't feel, my fundamental objection to President Clinton is not that I'm for this or against that or disagree with him about the other thing, is that I don't feel that he has any sense of the quantitative danger of government. So it's made me more libertarian, not more right, not more left. Just more libertarian.
I just want to make one little comment about that. I think that's really interesting that you say that, because I think, just something to think about, that senior boomers have a greater libertarian streak than freshman boomers, because we are bigger followers. Look at Facebook and all the things we join. We don't have as much a sense of privacy or of, I think, uniqueness as you older people who were a little more influenced by the greatest generation and more self-reliant. We just want to
The other thing is that we experienced firsthand, older baby boomers experienced firsthand we experienced anti-libertarianism. We saw racism. We didn't see like the kind of racism that like gets touted about today. We saw real racism. We saw real racism. We heard it. We heard the words in our own damn houses. We heard our parents talking this way. We saw a restrictive, repressed society. We remember when the revelation of being gay was like, it wasn't like this Michael Sam thing. I don't know whether that's like a good NFL draft marketing for him to talk about this now or bull. I mean, it was like a horror, it was one of the most terrible things that could happen, covered up in families. We saw the kind of stuff that makes us libertarian. And a lot of that stuff, it's not gone. It's not completely gone, probably never will be completely gone, but it is well mitigated. It's headed down the drain. It is operative in our society at a much, much lower level than it was when older baby boomers were kids. And that's probably what gives us more of a libertarian streak.
PJ, do you think that the baby boom generation is unique to America, or could it possibly repeat itself in the near future as other countries or areas become more economically strong in the world?
Oh, no, I don't think it's unique to the United States at all. The reason I wrote about the American baby boom was because I originally thought about writing about it, because there was a baby boom after World War II in almost all of the countries, including the defeated countries. There was a worldwide baby boom. And I thought about writing about that, and I realized I just didn't know enough about it. I mean, I simply didn't know enough about it. Baby boom was different in Britain. It had many of the same similarities, many similarities to our baby boom. But for instance, food and clothing were still rationed in Britain until 1954. That makes for a very different late 40s, early 50s than we experienced. Obviously, a country like Germany was totally, physical plant of the country was destroyed. The French had like a political, aftermath, which really didn't even get settled. I mean, I don't know if it even really got like started until like 1968, but they also had the colonial wars. So in all of these places, baby boom was different. But the net result, as we all know from knowing people from other countries who are similar in their interests and background and sort of level of education, level of income to us, it does seem to be a universal phenomenon. I do not feel a fellow baby boomer from France or a fellow baby boomer from Italy or from Spain or from Germany or Britain or Ireland does not seem like a stranger to me. They obviously belong to, and this is true in Japan too, Hong Kong, the more prosperous places in Latin America. We are very much cosmopolitan citizens of the world, and so yeah, no, I don't think this is unique to America at all.
Yeah, PJ, I was just curious, where do you live these days, and what do you think, in your opinion, is the best place for boomers to live in America, and what's the worst place for boomers to live in America?
Well, I live in New Hampshire, and I live in rural New Hampshire, and it is Dickens-like, the best of places and the worst of places, kind of depending on what time of year it is and so on. But the best place I think the emblematic place for boomers to live is in the big cities. I mean, I think there is something fundamentally urban about us. We mostly grew up suburban. Not the suburbs of today that go on forever, but I mean, they're relatively compact, houses fairly close to each other, sort of often part of the city or just outside the city. And we didn't like that all that well. And I really think we are an urban generation in attitude. Now, at the same time, and this I think is especially true of the younger baby boom cohort, there's a strong outdoorsy aspect to our generation, and I think it becomes more pronounced among younger baby boomers and perhaps Generation X and Generation Y. So there's that side of things. The worst place for us to live, I think, has to be Washington, D.C. And the reason for that is because of the bad things that we would be doing if we lived there.
I was wondering if you could speak on the effect of the Beatles on the boomers after the death of Kennedy.
The effect on, I'm sorry, I didn't...
After the death of Kennedy?
The effect on the boomers of the death of Kennedy. It's interesting. I think there is often more, people believe that the death of Kennedy had a bigger effect on the psyche of the baby boom than I think it actually did. It had a tremendous effect on the psyche of America at the time and on our parents, really. Because you have to understand that John F. Kennedy, he was our parents. He was the first member of the greatest generation to be president. And Jack and Jackie That was our mom and dad, except our mom and dad richer, our mom and dad prettier, our mom and dad more articulate. It was our mom and dad's idealization of their ideal of what they would like to be, their idealization of their generation. And it was shattering to them. And being, I was a junior in high school when this happened, and so I was fully aware of what, and I was stricken, I was very upset by it, as I think everybody was. But I was also, at the same time, I was kind of amazed by the kind of strength of emotion shown among older people at the time. Not a terribly emotional generation. The greatest generation was very much with the whole John Wayne program of like holding it in, not letting it show, you know, never let them see you sweat, you know. And this outburst of tremendous emotion from my parents' generation in some ways affected me more than the idea of this, an assassination of a president, as big a shock as that was. I'm not sure that the death of Kennedy was as formative to the baby boom as Watergate was, as learning not to trust the president. War in Vietnam, learning not to, you know, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? Learning to distrust authority, which we had not yet done, and not yet really even had cause to do during the Kennedy administration. I think the more formative things were Johnson and Nixon, and that dweeb Carter and his sweaters, you know. I mean, the whole thing, you know. You know.
I love Jimmy Carter. Just want to say that.
Well, he's still around.
I still do. I still do.
I don't know if Rosalind's going to let you date him, but you know.
In my heart, I lust for him in my heart. Remember that.
So, PJ, as a segue to what you were just mentioning about not trusting the government and the anti-war of protests and whatnot of the senior baby boom generation, basically, and coming out of Woodstock and anti-Vietnam, how would you reconcile what then subsequently happened when that baby boom generation was running the show and we marched right into Afghanistan and Iraq, you know, under us, basically? We were the ones that said, go for it.
Oh, no, those are our wars. Bosnia, too. I mean, our intervention in Bosnia, which I gotta say was more successful than our intervention in Iraq. Afghanistan, I guess, is still to be determined, but I'm not betting the over on Afghanistan. One of the things that baby boom, of course, didn't change human nature, and it didn't change the nature of geopolitics. But one of the things, if you look at the scale, when the baby boom has chosen to use military power, and we have quite frequently, much more frequently than you might expect from the way that we acted in the 60s. But you know, the thing is that every president has found out, including this one, who came in part won this election because won his first term, in part by opposing George W. Bush's adventures in Iraq and Afghanistan. You will notice how little our foreign policy has changed since President Obama was elected. And it's because you run up against the reality of foreign policy, which you're just not in charge of because it's full of foreigners. And you just don't know what they're going to do next, you know, and it becomes very hard. But one of the things I will say about the baby boom, if you look at, we've had a large number of military interventions. It's actually, somebody pointed out to me that Bill Clinton used the military in one form or another to intervene here or there around the world more than any other president in the history of the United States. But observe the scale. Observe the scale. Every death is horrible. I've spent a long time covering wars. I've got nothing good to say about them. Every death is horrible. But the scale of the deaths and destruction and damage done to the civilians has been so much smaller under the baby boom than it was in places like Vietnam and the Korean War, let alone World War II or World War I. You know, I mean, World War I was thinking the generation that caused that is the idiot generation. I mean, you know, how could they? And for that matter, it was the idiot generation that let World War II happen. You know, I mean, it could have been stopped.
Hey, you know, there's a question that I really want to ask. What is the future of the baby boomers? I mean, we saw the greatest generation go off to Arizona, New Mexico to retirement communities. Do you see the boomers doing that, or
No,
is that gonna be a model that disappears?
No, you know, this is one thing I say in the book. I said that, you know, we're the generation that insisted that a passion for living should replace working for one, you know? So, you know, I will say often to my wife, I will say, you know, I'd really like to retire. And she says, from what? You know? And so, no, I do think we'll have a different, on the other hand, you know, age cannot be denied completely. Rodney Dangerfield had this wonderful line where he said, my doctor told me I'm at the age where if I take really good care of myself, I'll get sick and die.
Right.
What class of the boomers shows the greatest interest in creating laws like no Pop-Tart guns?
What class of the
Which is the lawmaking class of the boomers?
Yeah. I think it probably has to be blamed on that senior group simply because they're of the age where they have their hands on the controls, the political levers. You know, politics is not a young person's game. It's definitely people, you know, in their 60s still have a tremendous amount. And there's also the odd thing that how a generation as wild as we were supposed to be then turned into these helicopter parents. You know, and I think there's two things that caused that. One was we scared the shit out of ourselves.
Yes.
You know, we did it all, and whoops, you know, that maybe wasn't such a good idea. The other thing is, as a generation that refused to grow up, and a generation that will never grow up, when we look at our kids, we know exactly what they're thinking, you know. This causes us to pass a lot of rules and regulations about what they do, because we know what they're up to. And I don't think our parents knew what we were up to, you know. Somebody, I wish I could remember who said this, because it is not my own, and I'd like to give credit. But they talk about, we're the helicopter parents, our parents were the drone parents. They kept their distance, and every now and then,
good.
whack. You know?
Right.
We're right there helping with everything.
PJ, when you were a tweener and early teenager, what were the pop culture influences on you in terms of music, TV, and movies, etc.?
Yeah, I really belong to, you know, I'm sufficiently of age that the earliest influences on me were really garbage. You know, I mean, there was a period in American pop music before, not only before the Beatles, but before Motown really kicked in, where the pop music on AM radio was really trash. Yeah, it was just, and that was when Elvis was in the army, so even he wasn't around, you know. It was, you know, itty bitty teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini kind of, you know. It's
In the book, you write the lyrics to Louie Louie.
Oh yeah, I did. I looked up the lyrics to Louie Louie. They are disappointingly banal. And not,
I actually
not
was sorry
dirty at
you
all.
revealed that. I thought.
Yeah, I
that
did. I
pulled the
had a
curtain
qualm
away.
for a moment about telling that truth, but so that I really kind of came of age with a kind of junk culture of the late 50s and very early 60s, and so you know, that's one of the things that makes me, when I look at the junk culture that my children have, you know, out there, makes me think, well, I survived. You know, I survived the flying purple people eater and the hula hoop and stuff, and they'll survive Jay-Z or, you know, whoever's. I'm sure there are much worse people than that, but I don't know what their names are. So.
Yeah, hi. I don't know to what extent you can connect my point to the baby boomers, but it'd be interesting to hear your insights. When we were kids, education seemed to be of a lot more value to more families than it is today. And I would imagine that our ranking internationally was probably much higher in the 50s than it is today.
Well,
And then the other thing is that our values and our respect for people seem to be much more poignant back in the 50s and 60s than they are today. So the question is, what could save the United States from becoming a third world country, given that there's literally zero manufacturing here? I think all our malls have become Chinese product distribution centers. There's nothing being built, just distributed. So given the senseless things that our kids do in general, I'm sure there are a lot of brilliant kids, but in general, everything seems to have been deteriorated. What can save us 50 years from now?
I couldn't disagree more. I couldn't disagree more. Yes, education was more materially valuable for the older people here in the audience. And the reason was marginal utility. There were relatively few college graduates. And when we became college graduates, we joined an elite. It is no longer an elite thing to be a college graduate. That doesn't mean that the people who went to college didn't learn a huge amount about the outside world, the intellectual world, and the cultural world. It doesn't mean that it doesn't make them better citizens. I mean, sending everybody to college won't necessarily guarantee them a wonderful job, but it makes them bigger, more interesting people. As far as international test scores go, I mean, there are all these countries all over the place, like, you know, Slovenia has a higher math score than we do. Did Google come out of Slovenia, you know? I mean, Microsoft came out, he dropped out of college, you know? I mean, it's like test scores. I was talking to a businessman friend of mine, a pretty successful businessman friend of mine, and I said, well, I guess, you know, A students work for B students. And he said, oh no. He said, B students work for C students, A students teach. You know, I'm not worried about that aspect of America. Yes, we're going through a tremendous technological revolution at this time. And all technological revolutions, be they howsoever good for mankind in the long run, are extremely disruptive and have a major downside. If you don't think so, I refer you to Blake's poems about dark satanic mills. And yet we know that the Industrial Revolution raised continents of people out of abject poverty into, you know, some semblance of a decent life. And I have a feeling that the technological revolution is going to be doing the same thing, but we're in the middle of it, and we're in the most disruptive part of it. And as for things like manufacturing, you know, I mean, there's Ricardo's principle of comparative advantage. If it can be done better and cheaper someplace else, do it better and cheaper someplace else. It leaves us more opportunities to accomplish things that we want to accomplish more. What do you want to do? Work in the factory making the CDs, or you want to make the music that goes on the CDs? You know, so I'm just, you know, I'm not as concerned about those things. I'm much more optimistic. Now, anybody who's a short-term optimist is an idiot, you know. But I think long-term optimism, I think there's pretty
You know, that's a very timely note to end this part of the conversation on, as it was just announced today that Google became more powerful economic entity than Exxon, which is, I think, a really big...
has a higher stock value, but...
Right. Sadly, Bing was
however,
on that
if
list,
you have the choice between having a oil well and a Google mine in your backyard, go with the oil.
Go with the oil.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for your great questions, and PJ for the conversation.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.